there. I'll have a word of prayer. We're going to turn it over to our guests. Pray with me. Our gracious Father, this is a blessed night that we can come together and be challenged, encouraged, have fellowship. We want to give you thanks for the food we're going to share tonight, and that you have allowed Ray to be here and to use the gifts that you've given him to enrich and equip your church. And we give thanks in Jesus' name. Amen. Let's give a nice grace welcome to Ray Adams.
Oh, it's my great honor to be back with you. Thank you for your investment of time. I know this is not normal for us to do a 3-hour block, but I am so delighted to see so many of you back. Again, I thank Jerry for mentioning this book. My last spring during COVID, I had this thought in my mind for a long time. I've had students, I've had pastor friends encourage me to write a book. This is a historical fiction book, but it has a lot of biblical history in it. And so it follows, I mentioned this morning, one of the Jewish sects that Josephus referred to as the fourth philosophical school of the Jewish people, the Zealots. And so the book develops following a zealot who was so passionate about being a nationalist, desiring to overthrow Rome and to reestablish the theocracy with God as their king. And some of those people were very zealous in their effort. And so, anyway, this just took a direction that I've had such a blast writing. It grew out of my many trips to Israel. It grew out of my interested study in the Zealot movement. And it is from the time of Jesus. And so I hope that you will take advantage of perhaps getting it. I would love to hear what you think about it after you read it. Unless you don't like it, then I don't want to hear from you, okay? So, but I do thank you. All right. We're going to do just a little exercise here at the beginning. I said yesterday, I'm sorry, it seems like yesterday. I said this morning that one of the most critical steps in any research is an interpretation step. So whether you're even studying the Word of God, you must put things in their proper historical and grammatical context so that you are honest and true with what the Word of God says. Well, in the field of archaeology, for example, we find things, there they are in the ground. The immediate question we always have is, what is this? And as I mentioned, my professor archaeologist friend who said, we shall see, we shall see. And I love that approach. Now, I have taken the liberty to share around the room a few artifacts. And I'm going to see if you can locate these items. And then we're going to take a few moments to see if you can tell us what those items are, what you have in your possession. Now, just to narrow it down, I did not go past anywhere past the first 3 rows here, or the first row over here, first 2 rows over here. So confine your search to this part of the auditorium, okay? And I'll kind of keep track of what's been found. When you hold it up, I'll keep track of whether or not we've got all of them accounted for. Now, I want to invite the young people, if there are any children or teenagers, we're going to give them the opportunity to begin this endeavor. And then, but parents, don't think you're going to get off the hook, because if they are with you and they come back to sit with you, I will be asking you what it is they found, okay? And you're going to, I hope through this illustration, find out how difficult it is to know what you're looking at if you do not have a context for where it came from. All right? So there are 6 or 7 items out in this area of the gymnasium. Nothing on that table is fair game, okay? And I'll explain here momentarily what is on display over here and encourage you to come over and look at some of those items, all right? So, young people, if you would like to begin now, we will try to see if we can find these items. Go. All right? All right, if you find them, I want you to acknowledge or ask me. Sometimes you pick up stuff that belongs to the church, and, oh, there's one. Okay, good. Okay. Good, looking. Okay, we've got some being found. Oh, nice find, man. Whoa. Anybody? Whoa, yeah, that's one. Yeah, that's one. Nothing behind the wall. I see there was one here. Well, you don't have to give up just because you found one. Maybe you'll find 5. Okay, keep looking. Still a couple items. If you have something, hold it up. Let me just kind of see. Okay, I saw you get that. Excellent. I know what that one is. No, there's, I think everything that was on the stage is found. Oh, somebody pick. Okay, here we are. Yeah, okay. What you have the jar handle. Okay, what else? Okay, good. Yes, there's still, unless somebody else have one that I haven't seen, hold it up. You got the rock, yes. I think there's at least 1 or 2 other items. Okay. What did you have? Okay, good. Hang on to that. Excellent. I was looking to see if somebody had that. They're just kind of following each other around, so they all have eyes on it. All right, let's see if you guys saw it? Excellent. I want to know what you think that is. Oh, well, yeah, I said it's anywhere. Oh, I said it's only in front of these tables. This only, okay. Let me see. Oh, she didn't follow me. I had one I was going to point out. Quick, hurry, before somebody else gets up here. Careful. Can you see over there around that grate? Do you see anything that's not supposed to be there? Right here, to your left. This grate area. Do you see anything? Look, yes, you're hot. Yes, you got it. Okay. You may return to whoever brought you. And I'm so glad you came, okay? You trying to figure out what that is? Okay, you keep thinking. All right. Now, with any archaeological discovery, once the discovery is made, now some things are extremely obvious. If it's a piece of pottery and it's completely put together, I mean, we have, at the NEAL dig that I worked at in the Rephaim Valley, we picked up a big rock. There was a piece of pottery underneath it, and the rock had just landed straight on top of this pottery. Every piece was there, and we were able to put the whole vessel back together, okay? I worked at the City of David excavations just south of the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. This was one of the most famous excavations in all of Israel's history. And I got to go there. It was such a blessing for me to be part of that as a young man. And actually, when I worked on this archaeological dig at the City of David, there was a man who was one of the chief archaeologists of Israel by the name of Yigal Shiloh. And he was very famous even at the time, but He went on to become the head archaeologist of all of Israel for decades. And so it's rather funny now, because when I'm touring in Israel and we have guides, or we're someplace where and I'll mention I worked at the City of David Excavations with Yigal Shiloh. And everybody goes, "You worked with Shiloh?" Yes, I did. He did not know me. I did not know him. We talked, but okay. But all of these things, once they're discovered, at some point you have to assign a value to it. What is it that we have? Okay, so we're going to take just a couple minutes, look at some of these items. I know some of you will not be able to see the item, but I'll have them up here on the table. You'll be able to come up and look at them. So who wants to go first? Okay, now some of you that found it have to raise your hand. You can't, at this point, hide and say, I don't have anything to do with this. Okay, I know, young man, you have something. What have you and your parents determined that is? Okay, good. It's got, does it have a few cracks in it and things like that? Yeah, that was broken at one point, and we glued that back together. And what he has there is the small top to a small jug. It was for pouring. If I'm talking about a pig, if you have a small pig, what do you call that? A piglet. So if you have a small jug, you call it a juglet. Very good. You guys are bright. Maybe you heard about the farmer that called the church office and said, yeah, is the head hog of the trough there? And the secretary said, excuse me? Yeah, is the head hog of the trough there? And she said, well, if you mean our pastor, you can call him pastor or brother or reverend, but head hog of the trough is not in order. He said, well, I just sold a big piece of property and I wanted to donate $50,000 to the church. And she said, just a minute, I think the big pig just walked in. So, very good. That is the top to a juglet. Now, what I'm going to be teaching you through this session is, and you'll see it as we move through the notes, there is a perception in the natural realm of education that a lot of people in the ancient times were not smart people. They did not have the intellectual capabilities we have. They were not as intelligent. And what would fuel that decision? Why would they come to that conclusion? Say it. Evolution. Because most of these people will believe in evolution, they're going to go to Cro-Magnon man or Neanderthals, and they're going to suggest that knowledge has evolved and minds, human mind. But as creationists, we say that God created Adam and Eve with great intellect. Right from the beginning, men and women had full mental capacities. And really, they were brilliant because they invented things that had never been thought of before. It's one thing to build on a bunch of knowledge like we have today with the internet and things. It's another thing altogether to build something or create something that has never existed before. That takes real intelligence. All right, we'll get back to that. That little juglet that he has, that was used for dipping out of a bigger vessel. And like they would put that in there for olive oil or something like that, fill up oil lamps with it, because it was very easy. Then they would put that on a hollow handle of the bigger jar. And that hollow handle would have a sieve type thing. And if there was any excess olive oil on the juglet, it would drip down, go back into that handle, and then back into the bigger pot. They didn't lose a drop. Very intelligent to come up with that kind of a system. We find a lot of those types of things. So the juglet, good. Okay, we can't take that much time on. What do you have? Okay, and you're exactly right. She has a jar handle. Again, we'll have it up here on display. It could have been just one handle on the side of a jar or a cup. A lot of times there would be two jar handles, and it would be on like a vessel that you could put items in. But yes, that's good. What else? Anybody else over here have one? Okay, yes, sir. What do you have? Yeah. Okay, yeah, thank you. Yeah, I don't know what he's talking about, but no, very, very good. He has a piece of red sandstone. It's very pretty. It is a sedimentary rock, but it is from the rose red city of Petra. And when we go there in Jordan to Petra, sometimes there are all kinds of these red sedimentary rocks, sandstones, and it covers a large portion of what's been developed at Petra. And that's why it's called the rose red city of Petra, because of the color of the stone that is all throughout that place. But it would be very hard for anybody to guess, oh, this is from Petra, by just looking at it. All right, excellent, very good. Somebody else on this side want to show us? What do you got? Yes, ma'am, what do you got? Okay, I'm not really good about hearing it. Can somebody help? Okay, that is a very good guess. Actually, what she has is really something that it's not right for me to have put it out, because you're all assuming it's some ancient piece of pottery or something. She actually has a piece of cement, concrete. What she's holding in her hand is actually a part of the Berlin Wall. On the first days that the Berlin Wall fell down and people were knocking it down, I had a missionary friend that was in Germany, and he gathered up some pieces and he gave me a piece of the Berlin Wall. And so I considered that to be quite an interesting thing, but it without a context, you would never know what that was. Okay, great. Who else? Okay, yes, sir. What do you got? Okay, excellent. He guessed maybe it's just a square piece of bronze. It's actually brass, a piece of metal. But one time when we were in Israel, it might have been in 2010 when you guys were with us, they were redoing the Dome of the Rock, the Mosque of Omar, that gold-domed mosque in Jerusalem, the third most sacred shrine in all of Islam. What they were doing, though, is they were putting in place, measuring what they needed as a piece, and they were using this brass. And then they were cutting off pieces that they didn't need, so there was just excess falling. And we asked the foreman, hey, is it okay if we pick up some of this? He said, I don't care. So we started gathering up a few pieces of what was going to be on the Dome of the Rock. What we found out later is they would take the piece they needed, they would go and have it covered with nickel. It was nickel plated, and then it was gold leaf covering that, and the nickel would adhere to the gold better. So a lot of people look at the Dome of the Rock and think that's a solid gold dome on the Mosque of Omar, or the Dome of the Rock. But actually, it's brass with the nickel plating and then the gold leaf over it. That's still very beautiful and very costly. But so we gathered a few pieces of these remnants, and then someone in higher authority quickly came over and ran us off. They did not want us telling everybody that we had pieces of the Dome of the Rock, but I do. And I had a couple other pieces. At one point, I actually took one of those pieces and cut a part of it off and made a necklace in Hebrew for my wife out of a piece of the Dome of the Rock. So kind of a unique thing. But okay, we've got a couple others yet. Yes, sir. What do you got there? Yes, you do. I know some of you can see it because of its size. If I said I picked up that rock in the Elah Valley, you would tell me that is where David fought Goliath. What that young man is holding is an example of a sling stone. We think of the idea that they were using little stones. In fact, we perpetuate those ideas, right? We teach our children in church. And 5 little stones he took. 1 little stone went into the sling. Okay, I'm not going to go any further. The Bible does not say anything about little stones. What's it say? 5 smooth stones. Archaeologically, hey, somebody dropped the Dome of the Rock back there. Archaeologically, when we are digging in places, we find piles of sling stones, like that one right there. They are good size. They are formidable weapons. In fact, if you look closely at the one he held up, there's a little bit of blood on that. I think it's the very one that got Goliath. And if you'd like to purchase that stone, see me afterwards, we'll work something out. But the Bible talks about slingers. This was a formidable weapon. At one point in the book of Joshua, chapter 19, it talks about a civil war where all the tribes of Israel attack the tribe of Benjamin for an egregious violation, a sin against humanity. But what's interesting in that chapter, it talks about the Benjaminites. And it says they had 700 left-handed slingers that could throw a stone at a hare and never miss. Well, I'd give them a run for their money. But the truth of the matter is that they were actually Green Beret type troops, and that was their weapon of choice, sling stones. And so you'll have a chance to handle that and see, but that is anything but a small little pebble that David had. Now, that does not at all detract from God superintending the flight of that. And of course, it wasn't the stone necessarily that killed Goliath, but it knocked him down. And then as a final insult to Goliath, David goes over, picks up Goliath's own sword, and proceeds to operate. But that was the height of a victory, is to disarm the champion opponent and kill them with their own weapon. And that's what's going on there in 1 Samuel chapter 17. And it's just a great story, especially if you understand the insight that David picked up 5 smooth stones. Okay, couple others maybe. I know the young lady, yes, you have do you have an idea what that is? You're exactly right. It's very well done. It's a nice rim of a larger vessel. Again, the people were so smart, they would often make some of these large vessels to hold water, those kinds of things. Then they would bury those in the ground up to the rim, and it was unbelievable how long that water would stay cold, buried in the ground. You remember the story of Jesus when he's at the wedding of Cana. And you remember they took the stone pots, the stone vessels, and Mary said, according to Jesus, fill all of them up to the brim. Well, they were these large water-containing vessels. They filled them all up, and then Jesus, of course, performed the miracle. All right, but you understand that each one of these items by just the limited amount you see, you may or may not know what purpose it served. And so, at the point of an interpretation of archaeology, you have to be at least discerning to realize maybe they're right, maybe they're not. At the City of David excavations, we found several items where they were little figurines and they were riding on what appeared to be a horse. Well, the initial interpretation of those items, because we found several of them, was that, oh, these must be small idols, individual icons that would be in maybe someone's home. Well, the more and more of these they found, the more and more they concluded, no, these are not little idols. These are toys, you know? And so you can just imagine if somebody's looking at something 2,000 years old, and maybe we don't know what purpose it served, and we find these things after years and years, and then we try to figure out what was it? Well, sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's not so easy. I kind of like to use this analogy. Think of someone excavating in Tel Mason 2,000 years from now. I don't know what it's going to look like then. I'm pretty sure most of us will be looking down from heaven. Hopefully we'll all be there. But if they start excavating, all of a sudden they find this thing. And this is a pretty amazing thing because archaeologists frequently, when they start excavating, one of the first things they find, aha, a temple. Okay? Now, there are some reasons on why they would dig in certain areas of a tell, maybe to facilitate finding something important. But you see, archaeologists have to fund their digs. So they have to find some sensational finds. And it's amazing how often, aha, a temple. So we're digging here in Tel Mason. All of a sudden, we're excavating down, and we come across golden arches. Don't know exactly what purpose this is, but a temple. We even found a place for the burnt sacrifice. And there was a little red-nosed, red-headed guy over in the corner. That must be their idol. Okay? Now, if they didn't know what a McDonald's was, that's the kind of potential where mistakes could be made. And yet, that's the challenge of interpretation. Okay, is there anyone else have one that I haven't given you a chance to share with us? All right, I think we've got them all. We'll collect all of those. Those of you who are holding on to some of those, be careful. A lot of those pieces of pottery are 2,000 years old from the time of Jesus. All right? I probably shouldn't have told you that. Some are going to get in pockets and walk out. No. But just be careful. If you were 2,000 years old, you'd want to be handled carefully too. So anyway, let's kind of get back to our study with this grasp and understanding of interpretation is always something we must question and try to figure out by looking at all of the facts. Okay, so we concluded last time this morning with this idea of a tell, this man-made hill. It's formed, again, over multiple layers of civilization being built on the same place. Because of a good water source, because it was defendable, because it had a trade route nearby perhaps, they would rebuild over and over. So a tell is the Arabic word for hill, and it looks like this. Maybe. Kyle, I'm not getting it too advanced. Maybe you guys could help me. Did I move it? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so this tell is formed by these multiple levels. I was looking for this. This is the picture of a relatively unexcavated tell. Some of these tells are all over Israel. We'll drive down the road, see one of these man-made mounds, and most of them are untouched. Nothing has ever been done yet. But as we approach a tell, we want to see the, okay, my slide advanced here, Kyle, but not there. So just understand that as we approach an excavation and we start going down into this tell, we're looking to identify these different stratigraphic layers, the stratigraphy, the stratum of the tell. Because each one of those layers represents a layer of occupation and it represents an individual civilization. It's really quite amazing how quickly something will go back to nature if it's left alone. So here's a civilization, perhaps it was destroyed by an invasion, maybe there was a natural disaster like an earthquake, and over a period of just a short number of years, that will, what we often say, will go back to nature. I had a close professor. He worked at an archaeological site at Gezer. Maybe some of you have seen the pictures of Gezer in some of the recent activities in Israel over near Gaza. Gezer is in that direction. But when he excavated at Gezer, it was one of the most important excavations for decades in Israel. And it was so well done, so well developed. And so when we went back, it had been about 10 years since he had visited the site. It had been closed 10 years earlier. And so we went and found Gezer. Within the 10-year period, there were a couple of paths that had been so beaten down that they were still there. Otherwise, the entire tell was covered with sand, dirt, and overgrowth. You could hardly tell there had ever been an excavation there. That's how quick something like this can go back to nature, all right? So we're looking at these levels of occupation. We're trying to identify these different stratigraphic layers, and each one of those represents a level of occupation, a different civilization. Okay. Now, what we often look for is a good, as archaeologists, we look for a good burn layer. What would be the importance of looking along through a stratigraphy and all of a sudden finding a lot of ash, either white or black ash, and there's obviously been a significant fire here that has seemingly destroyed the entire period of occupation? What would be the reason that that would be good for an archaeologist? Okay, I may have asked the question very poorly. It separates automatically. We know if this was destroyed by fire, then whatever is below this is a different civilization. It's a very important line of demarcation. Otherwise, we look at the things that are being discovered. We try to identify the time period that the pottery and other things come from. And so, anyway, just that idea of a burn layer. Okay, let me move fast through this. So we're trying to clearly separate one stratum layer from another. The level below a burn layer is almost always new and a new era of history for the tell. All right. I'm going to show you a slide of how a cutout slide where you see into an area where you could see the stratigraphic layers, okay? This just illustrates, the next slide, it just illustrates how different levels of occupation might be different colors. Again, you can see that where there's an ash layer there, that would definitely define a different civilization than what's below that. And if you're in a tell that's been excavated down, we always leave in a square, we'll leave part of the tell unexcavated. So as you go down in these different squares, you just look right over into that wall and you see the levels of the different layers of stratigraphy. But the main thing that we're looking for are items that we find that identify the period that we're coming from. And that would be mainly pottery. Now, at the City of David excavations, we're finding pieces of pottery, and many of those pieces were just fragments. They could not be placed together with other fragments. There was nothing of importance on them as far as writing. And so we would just throw those pieces of pottery in a pottery dump. That's what we called it. And at the City of David excavation, we had a pottery dump that would cover this entire corner over here in the gymnasium, higher than this wall behind me. That whole area would just be throwaway pottery. It wasn't going to be good for anything. It couldn't be reconstructed. And so pottery was an extremely common thing to find in a dig. But by examination of pottery, you can start telling from what era it came from, what civilization. This is a kind of pottery that comes from Iron Age 1 period. Okay, that's just archaeology talk for a certain period around the time of the Israelites. Okay, so we look at the stratigraphy, and as we continue to go down, now keep this in mind. Archaeology is a destructive science. In other words, if on this slide, for example, we start at the top and we start taking out layers, looking for things, as we're going down, that is something that cannot be ever duplicated again because we've destroyed everything that's there. Now we can go to another part of the tell and maybe excavate. But as far as what we have worked on, it cannot be duplicated. Therefore, they take very careful notes, they take pictures, they draw drawings, they try to document everything they find along the way. I'll come back as we have opportunity to talk more about that. All right, so some of these tells are multiple levels of civilization, maybe 4 or 5 cultures, different cultures lived on that spot. But some of these places have huge numbers of layers. For example, again, some of the tells may have many layers of accumulated civilizations. One of the examples that I want to show is the site south of the Sea of Galilee at Beth Shan. Beth Shan. All right, good, thank you. Also known as Tel El Husn. And at this particular site, it has been seriously excavated over decades of time, and they have identified 28 distinct levels of civilization at this one tell. It was massive. I've got a couple slides, and it's in your notes as well, but the original tell was what's back there in the back. It was that high, and they've brought this all the way down to this level at this location. This is a Roman period. So this would be from the time of Christ. Beth Shan was biblically of interest to us because the story of Saul and Jonathan and Abinadab, the sons of Saul, they were all killed in one battle at Mount Gilboa. That is there in 1 Samuel 31. That is when this battle happened. Does anybody remember what the Philistines did after they had this glorious victory over Saul and his sons? What did they do with Saul's body? Yes, they beheaded them and then did what? They hung their bodies on the wall at Beth Shan. Well, this was the height of insult. And so the Bible tells us that actually some of the men of Ramoth Gilead on the other side of the Jordan River, they heard about Saul's demise, and at the risk of their own life, they went through Philistine territory to come and take down the bodies of Saul and his 3 sons and provide a decent burial for them. Okay, so biblically, that's one of the significant events of Bethshan. But throughout biblical history period, we have a number of citations. When Jesus was ministering, you'll remember he came down into the cities of the Decapolis, the 10 Roman cities that were south of the Sea of Galilee and dotted that region. And Bethshan, called in the Roman period Scythopolis. It looked like this in the time of Jesus. This is the Roman era period. The long, beautiful Cardo, the Cardo, the heart of the city, with these colonnades all around. The next slide shows us with these the great Roman amphitheater that is at Bethshan. And so, anyway, this is just a taste of what serious archaeology coming down all those levels to the Roman period and the discoveries that have been made at a place like Bethshan. All right? Some of these tells are excavated by archaeologists. They attempt to find out. Maybe they think something important is there, so they start to excavate. Again, it's all related to funding. If they don't find something serious real fast, a lot of times the money dries up. And so throughout history, some of these excavations have just found tells with a few levels of occupation. Some, like Bethshan, have been inhabited many, many times by different cultures. All right, a lot of people ask me, and I'll address the issue, can you keep the stuff that you find? Well, the simple answer is no, you can't. Anywhere you dig in the world archaeologically, whatever you find technically belongs to the country that you're excavating in. So like in Israel, they have first claim on anything of significance. Now, you'll look over there, and when you have a chance, you'll come up and see some of the pieces of pottery that I've found over the years, able to bring back. But that's stuff out of like this pottery dump over here. They don't mind if you take a jar handle or a little rim of a piece that they can't put back together. It doesn't have any writing on it, so there's really nothing of major significance. It's okay to take some of those things. But most of the time, anything that is discovered at an excavation belongs to the nation. Okay? And sometimes there's amazing discoveries. I mentioned about those little figurines. We found many of those at the City of David. We found bones, both human and animal. We found a lot of Roman coins. We found pieces of gold, something that was gold overlaid. Again, everything we find belongs to them. I'm personally aware of one situation where a group of students from Missouri State University there in Springfield, Missouri, where I live, and where I received a couple master's degrees, they were excavating up at Capernaum, one of the beautiful locations on the north shore of the Sea of Galilee. It was Jesus' city. It's where Peter lived, right? Capernaum. And so when Jesus began his earthly ministry, a lot of it centered around Capernaum. So they're excavating up there. And there's been a lot of excavation at Capernaum. They had excavated this one area. They had taken it down to an actual rock flooring. It was a home. But they were real excited now because everything had been done, and they were going to lift the floor. They were going to take all the floor out now that it had all been graphed and mapped and photographed, and they were going to excitedly see what was under this floor. Because on the outside of their area, there was an important wall that had been formulated, and it comes under this house. So anyway, they were ready to do this. Well, the archaeologists were working in one part of the house, anticipating this would be the most important area. And they had a young lady from southwest Missouri who was a green archaeologist. Now, that doesn't mean she was environmentally sensitive. She was a rookie. She didn't know. And that's one of the axioms of archaeology, by the way, that the greenest person on the dig will find the most important thing. And so that's exactly what they put her at the other end of the house and just kind of wanted to get her out of the way. Well, she lifts up this rock and screams. Well, everybody's head snapped around, but if you're involved in archaeology in a desert climate and you lift up a rock, what are you likely to find? Scorpions, snakes, tarantulas. Yeah. And I have found scorpions under rocks. I have found snakes under rocks, lifting them up. Well, she lifted this rock up and screamed. And what she found, and this shows that she was a green archaeologist, because what she discovered turned out to be the most important discovery of the entire dig. She found 230 gold Roman coins under this rock. Now, if she had been an experienced archaeology, like myself, 180 gold coins. Okay, I would not have done that. But isn't that amazing that she had no archaeological experience, but you never know what that next scoop of dirt could reveal. You never know what that next rock that you turn over might find. By the way, it's obvious that someone had hid that money with full intentions of coming back for it. I mean, we have stories that Jesus tells about parables, right? Where people hide money in a land and somebody finds it and then goes and sells everything they can to try to buy the land. They didn't have banks, so they hid their items to keep them safe. Well, for whatever reason, this person never came back. Maybe because the Romans came in and they were killed or whatever in the attack, but they never came back. And here, 2,000 years later, a girl from southwest Missouri finds that discovery. That's not unlike what some of the people who had treasures that were different than money. I have a facsimile over here, that piece of paper there. That is a section of the Isaiah scroll that was discovered in the Dead Sea caves. All right, the Dead Sea Scrolls. This is a copy of the original book of Isaiah. When they discovered that particular scroll at Qumran near the Dead Sea Scrolls, they found an entire Isaiah scroll that had 66 chapters, just exactly like your Bible has. And when they compared the Isaiah scroll and the manuscript of it, it was almost perfectly preserving what had been handed down for generations and centuries in copies of copies of copies. It was identical. And it shows how God has protected and His Word has been preserved. And the Dead Sea Scrolls are really important for that reason. I've got a facsimile over here of a portion of the Dead Sea Scroll of Isaiah from chapter 26, and there's some prophetic announcements in there. If you can read Hebrew, knock yourself out. But that's an example of how sometimes those are treasures people have. These people were so concerned about their treasures, these written manuscripts, these scrolls, that when imminent danger came, they had hidden their most precious valuables up in the mountains around the Dead Sea. And again, starting in 1947, a whole bunch of these manuscripts, documents were found and retrieved. Okay, so just this little paragraph, finishing it up. With that brief explanation of archaeological methods, practices, we want to consider some of the discoveries that have impacted the Bible over time. Some of these finds have been remarkable, and they are part of the confirmation and illumination of what we know about the Scriptures, okay? So for the next couple minutes, I'm going to go ahead and introduce this, and let's look at that section, archaeological discoveries that have confirmed or illuminated our biblical understanding. Once again, I want to reiterate, our presupposition is that God created men and women with great intellect. In fact, some of the early discoveries from centuries before the Israelites came on the scene are examples of amazing architectural and advanced civilization, these ancient people. They were not dumb. They were amazing in what they could do. And again, it's because of evolution that a lot of naturalists, secularists, would say, those people were dumb. They did not have the mental capacity we have today. In reality, we could point at a number of these discoveries and say, these people were brilliant. And we have a hard time duplicating some of the things they've done from the past. So we believe in the Creator God of the universe, and God made men and women with great intellect and abilities. The easy example I'm going to give you is an example from early man's creativity. And of course, I'm talking about the Great Pyramid of Cheops. Also known as the Great Pyramid of Khufu. 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 Same Egyptian monarch. And many of you have seen the picture of the Great Pyramid. But the truth is, this is really one of the natural ancient wonders of the world. If you ever get a chance to go to Egypt, you will be amazed and awed by the Great Pyramid. We got to go there with the Pelfreys. Did you guys go up inside the Great Pyramid to the exact geometrical center of the pyramid? But let me just give you how brilliant the formation of this is. There are over 2.5 million stones in the Great Pyramid. They average 2.5 tons each. Now, historians have been baffled on how in the world they did this. But some of the engineering prowess of the Great Pyramid is just amazing. For example, here on the side that's kind of in the shadow side, that's the north side of the Great Pyramid. Well, on the back side of it is the south side. Now watch this. Some of you guys are engineers, and you'll know how unbelievable this is. Each side of the Great Pyramid on the north and south axis, those sides are 780 feet long. And do you know when modern engineers measured that, the north and south sides of the Great Pyramid were 1/4 of an inch from being perfectly square. Now, we build buildings like this, and we don't get anything close to that kind of specificity in our engineering techniques. It's a rare thing to be that good. But you think about 2.5 million stones on a throw of 780 feet, and the two sides are only a 1/4 inch difference. It's just staggering. And the Great Pyramid was built shortly after the flood and is dated back to around 2600 BC. This is an engineering marvel. And so we are approaching our reconstruction of archaeology with the preconception that God created us with the great capacity to do amazing things. And some of these archaeological discoveries are just that. All right? Brother Jerry, why don't I turn it over to you? It's 5 o'clock. Maybe you want to take a short break, and then we'll come back in just a couple moments per his instructions.